So in the last slide, we were talking about the level of resource use, and we said that marginal value of product needs to equal marginal input cost at profit maximization. So we actually have our two lines here. We have our value of marginal product, and then we have the marginal input cost. Again, our marginal input cost, it's a straight line. It's a parallel horizontal line. And the reason that it's a parallel horizontal line is for the simple aspect that this firm is a price taker on their inputs. Because it is a perfectly competitive market, they are a price taker on their inputs as well. Now, our value of marginal product, it comes up, peaks, and then it begins to go back down. What I would encourage you to do is actually compare this particular graph and that particular line back to the marginal physical product curve. And what you're going to find is that they are identical to each other. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, they should be identical to each other because this curve, this value of marginal product curve, it's the same thing as the marginal physical product curve. That curve right there is the same thing as the marginal physical product curve. We're just multiplying it by the price of the output. That's all we're really doing. So those two curves are going to look very similar. And we know that profit maximization is going to occur where that MVP crosses or is equal to MIC. So we know that the number of hours, that input that we should use, is somewhere between 40 and 50 units. We know that we should be producing somewhere in that range. And actually, as a matter of fact, we don't even have to really guess, because we know that it should be, we're going to actually produce right there at what looks like about 46, 47 units. So just to kind of reiterate, if more hours of labor were used over and above this aspect, it would cost the firm more to pay those employees than what they would be bringing in. So let's say we try to use 50 hours, for example. The employees would only be bringing in this point right here, this little, where that red line crosses that black line, and it would be costing you this $5. It would be costing you more than you're receiving. But if less hours were used, let's say that they only used 30 hours, for example, then it would only cost you $5, but you would be receiving around 10 or 15. So if you're going to be receiving that much, it's going to be encouraging you to increase more until you get to this point where these two lines cross. So regardless of which method you use, regardless of whether or not you're using the level of resource use or the level of output, whether you use marginal revenue equals marginal cost or marginal value product equals marginal input cost, it doesn't matter which standpoint you're going for. It's going to yield the same profit maximization level of output or level of input. It's still going to yield the same amount of profit maximization. So something to consider is, even though we're dealing with it from an input standpoint, we're still going to be obtaining the same maximum profit. The maximum profit is still the same across both aspects. And it doesn't matter which one we use. And the main reason it doesn't matter is because we're dealing with the same numbers. We're still dealing with the same prices. If we figure out that the maximum profit is $186, it doesn't matter whether or not we're looking at from an input or an output standpoint. We're still going to be receiving $186 as our maximum profit. So to kind of recap the whole chapter, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, you always want to be producing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost if you're looking at it from an output standpoint, or where marginal value product equals marginal input cost if you're looking at it from an input standpoint. If we're going to look at it from an output standpoint, the break-even point is where the average total cost is equal to the marginal cost, and the average total or average variable cost equals the marginal cost. That's the shutdown point. We'd still operate in between those points, but we're going to be operating at a loss. And anything above the break-even point, we're making money off of it. If we go back all the way to the beginning, so fixed costs do not change. Variable cost will change as output changes and as input changes. If we wanted to figure out our averages, our average total cost, average variable cost, average fixed cost, our average revenue, we're going to just simply take our totals divided by the number of outputs. To figure out the marginals, well, it's the change in something. To find the marginal revenue or the marginal cost, we'll take, for example, marginal cost would be total cost, change in total cost, divided by change in output. Marginal revenue is the change in total revenue divided by change in output. Whereas if we get into the value of marginal product and the marginal input cost, we're dealing with the changes in inputs. We're dealing with the changes in input costs, or the changes in total cost divided by the change in input, for example. We're just looking at it from the input standpoint. Overall, that's kind of a quick recap of everything that we've talked about. Another thing I'd like to bring to your attention is at the end of chapter 2, or the end of the chapter notes, it actually kind of has a little cheat sheet of the different formulas. And it has a couple of examples that I would encourage you to look at. So if you haven't actually looked at the notes, go ahead and look at the notes, print off the notes, and go through those examples there at the end of the notes. And also I would encourage you to print off that cheat sheet and kind of have it there, because that little cheat sheet with the formulas sure is it'll help you out whenever you're going through the assignments and the tests and everything.